Love can lift you up, but secrets can tear you down sometimes. All it takes is one glittering piece of jewelry to unravel a life. Welcome to the heartbreaking tale of a man who showered his mistress with luxuries, even as his pregnant wife sold her cherished heirlooms just to keep the lights on. In this raw, intense drama, hidden betrayals collide with the longing for redemption. The characters are real, their emotions palpable, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Get ready for deception, passion, and ultimate choices. Brace yourselves, because once this story begins, there's no turning back. Richard Coleman had once been the sort of man who drew people in with a magnetic smile and boundless ambition. In college he met Emily Barnes, soon to become Emily Coleman, and she thought she had found her partner for life. She admired his tall frame, his neatly cropped dark hair, and a steady gaze that exuded purpose. He came from a well-to-do family in Virginia, and Emily believed life with Richard promised security and stability. Yet 4 years into their marriage, with a baby on the way, she felt more uncertain than ever. The early days of romance were a distant memory, replaced by late-night whispers of doubt and resentment. Richard, now a financial consultant at the prestigious firm Gray & Waters, arrived home at odd hours, brimming with excuses about late meetings or unexpected business trips. He'd remove his tie with a sigh plant, a half-hearted kiss on Emily's cheek, and scarcely engage in conversation. Her baby bump, a symbol of life and love, went largely unnoticed by the father-to-be. Emily's gut told her something was amiss. She had caught glimpses of texts from unfamiliar names. Late at night, he'd pace the living room on hushed phone calls. If she dared to peek around the corner, Richard would quickly end the call. But each time Emily tried to confront him, he'd dismiss her concerns. "Emily, you're overthinking. It's just stress from work." With her exhaustion from pregnancy and persistent morning sickness, Emily wondered if her hormones were indeed getting the better of her. And so she held on in silence, clinging to the vestiges of her once happy marriage. She pictured Richard's younger self, those bright eyes, the ambitious grin, how he'd spend long weekends planning beach getaways and stargazing by the fire. She prayed those memories might one day resurface, and that Richard might become that man again. But the reality was harsher. The electricity bill lay unpaid on the kitchen counter, and the obstetrician's fees were accumulating at an alarming rate. Emily hadn't worked for months due to pregnancy complications. They still owned a modest condo, thanks to Richard's parents helping with the down payment. But money felt scarce. Unbeknownst to her, Richard's affections had shifted in a direction that threatened to upend everything toward a woman named Sabrina Gray. Sabrina Gray was a woman who could make an entrance in any room. Towering in her sleek Louboutin heels, hair the color of champagne, she exuded confidence that practically vibrated around her. Her father, Harold Smith, was a high-profile attorney in Washington, D.C., and her family had social connections that extended across states. She carried an unassailable aura that made everyone around her feel small. Richard first met Sabrina Gray at a Gray & Waters charity event. She was representing her father's foundation that evening, looking luminous in a royal blue satin gown. He was trying to network with potential clients, but the moment he saw Sabrina, the champagne flute in his hand trembled slightly. Their eyes locked in a way that felt predestined. That chance encounter expanded into small talk, superficial at first about the gala's cause, until Sabrina's laughter broke down the formality. She teased him for his boring tie, and he was shocked by how she easily crossed personal boundaries with friendly jabs. That initial spark turned into an exchange of business cards, then coffee, the following weekend under the pretense of discussing her father's portfolio. Their interactions escalated quickly. Sabrina had a devil-may-care approach to life that Richard found thrilling compared to Emily's anxious pleas that they remain mindful of the budget. Sabrina came from money, a lot of it. She never asked, "Can we afford this?" She simply snapped her manicured fingers, and things materialized. Richard told himself he was merely building a new client relationship. But dinners turned into late-night drinks, and before he knew it, he and Sabrina were all over each other in a corner booth at a swanky rooftop lounge. From then on, Sabrina texted him day and night, and he answered with increasing eagerness. She represented something he felt he'd lost. Escape excitement, a carefree life. Before long, he hardly recognized himself when he looked in the mirror. Gone was the devoted husband who had once carried Emily over the threshold on their wedding day. Instead, a man consumed by deception stared back at him. At the office, co-workers noticed changes in Richard's routine. Vanessa James, a fellow consultant who sat a few cubicles away, couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at the fancy cufflinks he suddenly sported, the fresh cologne that smelled like expensive musk, and the self-satisfied grin on his face whenever his phone buzzed. Though Gray & Waters was a top-tier firm, few had the disposable income to indulge in big-ticket luxury items. Vanessa was no detective, but she had seen enough men in mid-life crises to suspect something was happening. As Richard's extracurricular activities intensified, Emily sensed the growing distance. No matter how many times she asked him what was wrong, his answers remained curt, as though she were intruding. The warm, gentle Richard, who once massaged her feet and asked about her dreams for the baby, was a stranger. She tried to keep herself busy. Despite her constant fatigue, Emily managed the household chores and scaled back on expenses. She swapped brand-name groceries for cheaper alternatives and turned off the air conditioner during sweltering afternoons to save electricity. The baby was due in a few months, and medical bills were piling up. She began receiving voicemails from the hospital's billing department asking about outstanding payments. Some nights, Emily would cradle her baby bump and look through old photo albums. She found pictures of their honeymoon in Italy. Richard smiling with a bottle of Tuscan wine, Emily resting her head on his shoulder. Those snapshots felt like they belonged to a different couple. She couldn't reconcile that memory with the man who now avoided her gaze at dinner, seldom asked about the child's health, and spent weekends away on business. Desperate for answers, she confided in her close friend, Aria Brown, who had known Emily since middle school. Over cups of chamomile tea, Emily let the tears flow. Aria frowned, hugging Emily, and promising to keep an eye out. She never confronted Richard directly. Aria was more subtle, but she asked leading questions whenever they met at social gatherings. "Hey Richard, how's the new project going? You must be swamped." She'd watch his reaction carefully, noting how his eyes flickered with guilt, or how he'd stammer over small details. But Richard never let much slip. He was too entrenched in his double life, carefully piecing together a facade that was growing increasingly fragile. The turning point came one chilly autumn morning when Richard and Sabrina were grabbing breakfast at a chic downtown bistro nestled among corporate high-rises. Sabrina wore a tight black dress, her lips painted a bold crimson, and she smiled at Richard over a cup of espresso. He had been vaguely discussing the difficulties of married life, though he avoided saying Emily's name. Sabrina, growing bolder by the minute, batted her eyelashes and mused, "I've always wanted a diamond bracelet, something that screams timeless elegance. the kind you can't resist touching every few minutes. She watched him closely, gauging how far she could push. Richard felt an odd surge of pride at the notion of giving her something that fancy. It was a twisted sense of accomplishment. If he could buy this piece of expensive jewelry, it symbolized that he was powerful, successful, still desirable. Pushing aside the pang of conscience at the thought of his pregnant wife, he made a mental note to research high-end jewelers. Sabrina had a knack for manipulation. She knew precisely how to stroke Richard's ego. With each coy smile and whispered promise, she tightened her grip on him. A few days later, Richard withdrew a significant amount of money from his personal savings account. He justified it by reminding himself that Sabrina's father might become a lucrative client for Gray and Waters, or perhaps Sabrina herself would invest in one of his financial ventures. It was business, he told himself, except in his heart, he knew it was much more personal. He drove to Tiffany & Co. with an uneasy feeling in his stomach. The store's glistening displays momentarily made him think about Emily, how she had always dreamed of owning a small diamond pendant, but never asked for one because of their budget constraints. Yet here he was about to drop thousands of dollars on a mistress. Despite the internal conflict, he pressed on, telling himself it was just a one-time indulgence. The bracelet was stunning rows of sparkling diamonds set in white gold. Its brilliance took his breath away, and he imagined the delight dancing across Sabrina's face when he presented it to her. For a moment, the ring of the credit card scanner sounded like alarm bells in his mind, but he hurriedly stuffed the receipt in his wallet, ignoring the guilt that gnawed at him. That evening, he took Sabrina to a trendy bar with velvet couches and dim lighting. Midway through their cocktails, he revealed the small signature blue box. Sabrina's eyes flashed. "Oh, Richard," she gasped, clasping her hands together. He placed the bracelet around her wrist. It shimmered under the overhead lights, every diamond a testament to betrayal. As they shared a passionate kiss in the dark corner of that bar, neither noticed Vanessa James at a table nearby. Vanessa had recognized her co-worker the instant she entered. Shock overwhelmed her as she watched Richard place a diamond bracelet on a woman who was definitely not his wife. She swallowed hard, unsure if she should confront them or walk away. Eventually, Vanessa slid out quietly, heart pounding with the knowledge she now possessed, while Sabrina flashed her new piece of jewelry to her circle of socialite friends. Emily's life was spiraling. She had just returned from yet another doctor's appointment, disheartened by the rising bills. The receptionist had politely asked if she planned to clear the outstanding balance soon, because the hospital was sending out final notices. The tension made Emily's chest tight. She glanced over at her modest collection of jewelry, a few items inherited from her grandmother, Cynthia Coleman, who had once been a nanny for a wealthy family. The sentimental value exceeded any monetary worth, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Emily realized she had no alternative. She couldn't keep living in the dark. Literally, she needed to keep the lights on, feed herself properly, for the baby's sake, and maintain basic health care. One Sunday evening, Emily quietly packed those heirlooms into a velvet box. Among them was a delicate pearl necklace passed down through 3 generations, a gold bracelet that had been her mother's wedding gift, and a sapphire ring Emily had worn on her 21st birthday. She drove to a reputable pawn shop on the less glamorous side of town, waves of nausea hitting her as she considered letting go of pieces filled with family memories. The pawn shop's interior smelled of dust and regret. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A middle-aged man named Thomas Lee greeted Emily from behind a glass counter filled with gold necklaces, old watches and random trinkets. He examined her items, taking his time, as if the fate of the universe rested on his appraisal. Each second felt like a year to Emily. Eventually, Thomas gave her a figure that made her eyes sting with tears. It was far less than their sentimental worth, but enough for immediate bills. Emily signed the pawn slip, hands trembling. She felt a sense of loss so profound it left her breathless. Still, she managed a polite thank you and trudged out of the shop in the cold drizzle. Later that night, with the money from the pawn shop, she paid the electricity bill and mailed a partial payment to the hospital. Tears blurred her vision as she wrote each check. She thought about her unborn child, how she was doing all she could to protect them. In bed, she curled into a ball. She tried to talk to Richard, who was working late, but it went to voicemail. The baby shifted in her womb as though trying to comfort her. She whispered into the darkness, "I'll do everything I can for you, little one. I promise." On a crisp November morning, Vanessa James decided it was time to speak with Emily. She wasn't one to meddle in other people's affairs, but after that shocking encounter at the bar, she felt morally compelled to warn Richard's wife. She had never been a close friend of Emily's, but they'd chatted at previous office parties, and Emily struck her as a kind, gentle soul. Vanessa managed to find Emily's phone number in the office records. Her hand shook as she dialed, dreading the conversation. Emily answered politely, sounding tired but gracious. "Emily, this is Vanessa James from Gray & Waters." Vanessa began, voice low, as though conspirators might be lurking. "I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something I need to tell you. It's about Richard." The pause on Emily's end was palpable. "I'm listening," she finally said, bracing herself. Vanessa swallowed. "I saw him last week at the Velvet Room downtown. He wasn't alone." She described Sabrina in careful detail, from the designer dress to the diamond bracelet. When she finished, the line went silent. Emily's voice, barely audible, asked, "Are you certain it was him?" Vanessa confirmed she was sure. She offered condolences and awkwardly ended the call, feeling heavy guilt. She had just torn open Emily's life with a few sentences. Emily pressed her phone against her chest, as though trying to crush the pain in her heart. All the suspicious moments, late nights, phone calls, unexplained charges came flooding back. She had been in denial, hoping she was simply paranoid. Now the puzzle was complete, and the picture was more devastating than she had imagined. Strangely, she felt relief in having certainty. At least she wasn't imagining things. However, the knowledge that Richard had spent a small fortune on a diamond bracelet for another woman, while Emily pawned her grandmother's pearls, left her seething with fury. Anger mixed with betrayal churned in her belly, intensifying her morning sickness. Later that evening, she confronted Richard the moment he walked in, still loosening his tie. "Who's Sabrina?" she demanded, voice trembling. Her eyes glistened with tears of rage. Richard froze, nearly dropping his briefcase. He was prepared to deny, deflect, or gaslight, but Emily's unwavering stare pinned him like a moth on a corkboard. In that split second, he realized the jig was up. He tried the usual lines. "She's just a client. It's for a big investment. You don't understand." But Emily's clenched fists and trembling chin told him she was beyond placation. "How could you do this to me, to our child?" she shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm selling my jewelry to keep us afloat, and you're buying diamond bracelets for someone else." Richard flinched at the mention of her pawned jewelry. Shame battled with anger. "I never asked you to do that," he shot back, as though that excused his actions. He tried to spin it into a story about how Sabrina might become a major client, how this was a necessary gesture. But the words died on his tongue the moment he saw the heartbreak on Emily's face. She didn't scream after that. Her voice grew eerily calm. "Get out," she said. "Stay at a hotel, a friend's place, wherever you want. I don't want to see your face right now." Richard stared at the woman he had promised to love and protect. He opened his mouth to argue, but the weight of his guilt dragged him down. He grabbed a change of clothes and left, ignoring the echoes of his own footsteps in the hallway. That was the night everything changed. Sabrina was waiting in her luxurious penthouse suite, wearing a black silk robe, a glass of champagne in hand. She heard the rumble of thunder outside and checked the time. Richard was late. She curled up on her Italian leather couch, the shimmering diamond bracelet on her wrist, catching the light from overhead chandeliers. When Richard finally staggered in, soaked from the rain, her eyes widened. "You look terrible," she remarked, her voice tinged with concern. She offered him a towel and a drink, but he stood there silently dripping water on her marble floor. "She knows Sabrina," he muttered. "Emily knows everything." Sabrina felt a jolt of adrenaline. She had half expected this day to come, but it unnerved her nonetheless. "So what does that mean?" "For us?" she asked. The ooze tasted foreign on her tongue, as if she were testing its significance. Richard sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. He mumbled something about being kicked out, about Emily's hurt and anger. Sabrina felt a twinge of guilt, but also a surge of triumph. In her mind, if Emily was out of the picture, that gave Sabrina an open path to Richard's undivided attention. She tried to comfort him, stroking his hair and whispering that it would be all right. Yet as the night wore on, Sabrina found herself questioning the extent of her own feelings. She enjoyed the chase, the glamorous gifts, the excitement of sneaking around. But was she truly prepared to become the official partner of a married man with a baby on the way? The diamond bracelet sparkled ominously, as though reminding her of the cost of their affair. Meanwhile, Richard was trapped in a swirl of regret and fear. He recognized his mistakes, but felt powerless to correct them. His once invincible arrogance had crumbled, and he could only cling to the illusions Sabrina offered. That night, she ordered takeout and poured them both champagne. They ate in heavy silence, each lost in a labyrinth of doubts and desires. In the aftermath of Richard's expulsion, Emily found solace in the unwavering support of friends and family. Her older sister, Miranda Wilson, arrived the next morning. She hugged Emily and insisted on staying for as long as needed. Miranda was a no-nonsense woman, a high school teacher who believed in confronting issues head-on. Together they set out to put Emily's life back in order. Miranda helped with the housework, accompanied her to doctor appointments, and offered moral support. She encouraged Emily to find a lawyer. "I know it's painful to think about," Miranda said gently, "but you have to protect yourself and the baby." Emily consulted Jason Thompson, a reputable family attorney recommended by a mutual friend. She told him the entire saga, how Richard's affair had come to light, and how she had pawned her precious heirlooms to pay the bills. Jason listened intently, jotting down notes. His clean-shaven face grew grim as he realized the lengths of Richard's betrayal. "Emily, you have options," he explained. "We can file for a legal separation, start discussing financial support, and look into spousal maintenance. You shouldn't have to struggle alone, especially not when you're pregnant." His words offered a glimmer of hope amid the despair. Emily left the law office feeling slightly emboldened. She had spent so many months on the defensive, fearful of confronting Richard. But now she realized she wasn't alone. She had a growing baby who needed her, a sister who stood by her side, and a close-knit group of friends who would stand up for her whenever she stumbled. A week of living in hotels took its toll on Richard. Between the business stress and personal turmoil, he found it impossible to focus. Clients complained he was missing deadlines, and his boss at Gray & Waters took him aside, warning him that his performance had dropped. He tried to make amends with Emily through tearful phone calls. But she refused to speak to him, insisting he communicate only through her lawyer. He left voicemails that swung between sorrowful pleas. "We can work this out," and desperate. Anger. "You can't keep me away from my own child." None produced the result he wanted. Emily remained resolute. Sabrina initially welcomed his presence in her penthouse, but she grew uneasy with his sudden emotional dependence. She enjoyed the thrill when it was clandestine. Now, with the affair in the open, she found herself playing nursemaid to his collapsing psyche. The romance that once felt exciting turned suffocating. Late-night arguments sprang up, fueled by guilt and uncertainty. Sabrina recognized the stark difference between being an illicit lover and a potential wife to a man with serious responsibilities. Finally, one evening, Sabrina sat him down and spoke frankly. "Richard, maybe you need to sort out your marriage or finalize things before you move on with me. I can't handle this emotional war zone." She fiddled with the diamond bracelet, twisting it around her wrist. For the first time, that glittering piece of jewelry felt like a chain rather than a prize. Richard stared at her, his eyes tinged with red from lack of sleep and too much whiskey. A cold realization sank in. Even Sabrina was telling him to handle the wreck he had created. He had nowhere else to run, no illusions left to cling to. He had destroyed the trust of the only woman who had truly loved him unconditionally. And for what? Some fleeting fantasy that was already losing its luster. Richard finally mustered the courage to meet Emily on her terms in Jason Thompson's office. Emily arrived wearing a simple grey dress that did little to hide her baby bump. Her once soft, caring eyes now held a steely resolve. He tried to speak to her directly, but she avoided his gaze, gesturing at Jason to handle the conversation. Jason maintained an even tone, outlining Emily's stance. She wanted a legal separation, financial support during the pregnancy, and contributions toward medical costs. She also wanted the condo in her name if they proceeded to divorce. Richard's voice cracked when he responded, "I'll provide for my child. I'll pay for everything. I need a chance to make this right." Emily's jaw tightened, and tears glistened at the corners of her eyes. "You can't buy your way out of this," she said softly. "This isn't just about money. You broke me. You broke us." The words struck him like a hammer. He had always defined success by numbers and deals. But Emily made it clear that trust and love were priceless. He signed the temporary separation agreement and left, shoulders hunched. Outside the office, he saw Emily waiting for a taxi. Her posture was rigid, her knuckles white around her purse. Against all better judgment, he approached her quietly. "Emily, I'm sorry," he said, voice trembling. "I was stupid and selfish, and you didn't deserve any of it. I know words won't fix this, but please take care of yourself. Take care of our baby." She didn't look at him, but he caught a slight tremor in her lip. Before she could respond, a taxi pulled up. She got in, shutting the door on his outstretched apology. Through the window, he saw her close her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. The taxi drove off, leaving him standing on the sidewalk in a swirl of regret. Life continued an uneasy stalemate. Emily's days were punctuated by prenatal checkups and the slow, painful process of reimagining her future. She prepared the condo's second bedroom for the baby painting. The walls a soft yellow to avoid stereotypical colors. Miranda helped pick out a crib from a yard sale, and they restored it to its former glory with a fresh coat of paint. Each small project gave Emily a sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Sabrina felt a growing urge to put distance between herself and the chaos. She took a 2-week trip to Europe, citing business obligations with her father's foundation. In truth, she needed to escape the tension swirling around Richard. She found herself browsing London's luxury boutiques, alone, diamond bracelet shoved into her suitcase. Without the affair's thrill, it seemed to have lost its appeal. Back in the States, Richard's mental anguish turned into a quest for redemption. He rarely slept. His bank statements haunted him, one-line item screaming at him from the page, Tiffany & Coleman. XXX. Even his credit card company flagged the extravagant purchase, calling to verify the suspicious transaction. It symbolized the epicenter of his betrayal, an object that had cost him more than money. Determined to salvage a shred of dignity, he threw himself into therapy sessions with a counselor named Dr. Miranda Wilson, no relation to Emily's sister. The irony of the shared name was not lost on him, but Dr. Wilson's approach was strictly professional. She forced him to confront the roots of his discontent, his constant need for external validation, his fear of domesticity, and the emotional void he tried to fill with Sabrina. These sessions were brutal, but eye-opening. Meanwhile, Emily's neighbors, an older couple named Evelyn and Mark Carter, offered kindness in unexpected ways. They brought over meals and groceries, suspecting Emily was struggling. She tried to refuse, but Evelyn insisted. "Consider it our gift to the baby," she said, patting Emily's hand with grandmotherly warmth. Sporadic texts from Richard landed on Emily's phone. Apologies, updates about money deposited into their joint account, and occasional pleas to hear how the baby was doing. Emily felt torn between anger and a lingering love for the father of her child. But each time she considered responding, she remembered the diamond bracelet. She remembered the tears shed in the pawn shop. It hardened her resolve to move forward without him. One evening, Emily sat at the kitchen table finalizing the budget. She'd received a small check from Richard as part of their separation agreement, but it barely covered half the hospital fees. She needed to figure out how to manage the next few months until her maternity leave transitioned into some form of paid leave, though she had minimal coverage from her previous job. Suddenly her phone buzzed. A text from Sabrina Gray. Emily froze, blood draining from her face. She had never communicated with Sabrina directly yet. There it was. Sabrina. "I know we've never spoken, but you should know that Richard wants to reconcile. I don't want to stand in your way. Let's talk if you want." Emily's fingers trembled over the phone screen. The audacity of the woman who had upended her marriage offering a polite conversation felt like a sick joke. She tossed her phone aside, not trusting herself to respond in a civil manner. Days later, a flower delivery arrived. Emily opened the door to find a nervous courier holding a massive bouquet of roses, lilies, and orchids. The attached note read, "I'm so sorry for everything. Richard." Emily stared at the flowers, tears gathering in her eyes. She remembered how once, early in their relationship, Richard had brought her daisies after their first fight, proclaiming they symbolized new beginnings. Now these flowers felt like a bandage on a bullet wound, beautiful but woefully inadequate. She gave the bouquet to Miranda, who placed it in a vase. But Emily couldn't stand to look at them. Every rose, every lily reminded her of the betrayal. She hurried to her bedroom, locked the door, and cried into her pillow until she fell asleep. The contractions came earlier than expected, sharp, insistent, and undeniable. It was a grey, chilly afternoon when Emily clutched the edge of the kitchen counter, her breath catching as another wave of pain rolled through her. Miranda rushed to her side, eyes wide but steady. "It's time," she whispered. They moved fast. Bags were already packed. The car was warm, and before Emily knew it, they were racing through the city streets toward the hospital, the skyline a blur behind the glass. Inside the maternity ward, nurses ushered her into a delivery room with practiced urgency. Her doctor arrived within minutes, checking vitals, calming her between contractions. Emily gritted her teeth and focused on the ceiling tiles above, trying to hold herself together through each scream and push. Her body was working harder than it ever had, and she felt every second of it. Somewhere between one contraction and the next, Miranda texted Richard. She hadn't wanted to at first, but he had a right to be there. A father should at least be present for his child's arrival, no matter the damage done. Richard arrived an hour later. Breathless hair tousled his eyes, frantic. He hovered outside the delivery room, unsure if he'd be allowed in until Miranda stepped out and gave him a single nod. Emily hadn't protested. In that moment, pain overrode pride. When he entered, Emily didn't speak to him. She didn't have the strength. She was deep in labor now, sweat glistening on her forehead, her hands clutching the bedrail like it was her lifeline. Richard moved quietly to her side and took her hand. She didn't pull away. In that moment, it wasn't about them. It was about survival, and about bringing a new life safely into the world. Hours passed in a whirlwind of commands, deep breaths and tears. Then finally a cry, thin, high, and perfect, cut through the air. The room fell still for a heartbeat as the doctor lifted the baby up, announcing, "It's a girl." They placed the baby on Emily's chest. She looked down, tears streaming from the corners of her eyes, as she whispered, "Grace." Richard stood at her side, wordless. His eyes filled as he stared at the daughter he hadn't yet earned the right to know. He placed one trembling hand on Grace's head, and Emily didn't stop him. For a brief moment, the past receded. All the betrayal, the pain, the shattered promises, it melted into the background. Here was their child, a new beginning wrapped in a pink blanket, blinking up at the fluorescent lights with wonder. Emily didn't speak again until the nurse took Grace for measurements. Then, with a quiet voice that carried a world of hurt, she said to Richard, "You can hold her, but don't think that changes anything." He nodded. He understood. The hospital room had quieted, but Emily's mind hadn't. She sat by the window, Grace asleep in the bassinet, beside her the afternoon light falling across the floor in broken patches. Just days ago, she had brought new life into the world, a baby girl with eyes like hers and Richard's dark hair. Her name was Grace. Emily had chosen it because she wanted her daughter's life to be filled with what her own had lacked recently, dignity, strength, and peace. Richard came each day, but he stayed at a respectful distance. He brought baby clothes, soft blankets, and offers to cover the hospital bills, which Emily accepted without thanks. She no longer owed him emotional access. Not after everything. They spoke in hushed voices when they did speak. Conversations were brief, strained, like two people navigating a minefield. One afternoon, while Grace napped and the monitors beeped in soft intervals, Richard tried again. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of it. For hurting you. For failing you. For failing her." Emily looked down at her daughter cradled against her chest. Her voice was calm but cold. "You didn't just fail us, Richard. You abandoned us. You chose someone else. While I was pawning my grandmother's pearls to keep the lights on." Richard lowered his eyes. He didn't argue. This wasn't a moment for defense. It was a reckoning. When Emily was discharged, Miranda and Aria helped her gather her things and settle back into the condo. Grace's presence filled the apartment with new rhythm and meaning. Emily's days were now shaped by feedings, diapers, lullabies, and the ache of rebuilding a life from ashes. The locks on the door had been changed. Richard knew it. He didn't protest. Instead, he hovered at a distance. He texted asking for pictures of Grace. He left groceries at the doorstep. He checked in before visiting, always asking permission first. Emily appreciated that. It didn't fix what was broken, but it showed he understood there were consequences now. He also started therapy on his own. Emily didn't ask him to. He sent her a message once, "Richard, I'm learning how to be better. Not for you to earn you, but because our daughter deserves a better man than I've been." She read it 3 times and never replied. In a quiet moment, watching Grace sleep against her chest, Emily whispered, "I don't know what happens next." The baby's tiny hand curled around her finger, and that was enough of an answer for now. She didn't know if trust could ever be restored, but she knew her strength was no longer a question, and whatever future unfolded, she would walk into it with her head high and her daughter in her arms. Time moved differently now. Each hour stretched and folded into the next, like a slow inhale that never quite exhaled. Emily counted the days by the size of Grace's yawns, the soft weight of her daughter curled on her chest, the rhythm of her tiny breaths anchoring her to the present. Grace was 3 months old now. Her smile came easily. Her laughter was starting to fill the apartment warm and bright. And every time Emily looked at her, she felt both whole and hollow whole, because of Grace's presence hollow, because of the broken pieces left behind. The days were busy, bottles, naps, laundry, but the nights were the hardest. That's when the questions came. Would she be enough? Could she raise Grace without bitterness? What if Richard's promises were real this time? He was trying that much, she had to admit. The money arrived on time. The diapers and formula showed up at her door. He attended the co-parenting therapy sessions, always quiet, always early. He even started asking more about Grace's little milestones, her favorite toy, her sleeping schedule the first time she rolled over. Still, Emily kept her walls up. She didn't know how to let them down. Her emotions were layered now. Anger, exhaustion, cautious optimism, and beneath it all, hope. Not for a reconciliation, not yet, but maybe for something stable, something safe for Grace. Richard had started therapy on his own. He sent her the name of his counselor and occasional updates how they were unpacking his insecurities, his need for validation, the selfishness he now admitted had cost him everything. Emily appreciated the honesty even if it came late. She hadn't cried in front of him since the hospital, but she had cried plenty when alone sometimes, holding Grace, sometimes standing at the kitchen sink, memories hitting her like gusts of wind she couldn't brace for. The image of the diamond bracelet still stung like a bruise she kept pressing. But she was healing, slowly. She started freelancing again, taking on social media and copywriting work from small businesses. It wasn't much, but it gave her independence. Her savings account was growing, so was her confidence. She still wore her wedding ring on a chain tucked under her shirt. Not because she couldn't let go, but because she wasn't ready to forget. The pain had shaped her, and she wasn't ashamed of it. One evening during a therapy session, the counselor turned to Emily and asked, "Do you think you can ever trust him again?" Emily was quiet for a long time. She looked at Grace, playing on the floor, her little hands reaching for a soft rattle. "I don't know," she finally said, "but I'm willing to see who he becomes." And that was enough for now. Not forgiveness, not a reunion. Just the possibility of something better. The morning was crisp sunlight streaming through the windows, like gentle reminders that life kept going, even when your heart hadn't caught up yet. Emily stood in the hallway, an old cardboard box cradled in her arms. She had been reorganizing the closet, trying to make space for Grace's growing collection of baby items, when she stumbled across it, forgotten beneath winter coats and unused luggage. She carried it to the couch, knelt beside it, and opened the flaps slowly. Inside lay a relic of a different time. A weathered Polaroid album she hadn't seen in years. She brushed off the dust and opened it. There they were, she and Richard, in their college days. In one photo, they sat on a campus bench, grinning like fools, their arms wrapped around milkshakes and each other. Another showed Richard pretending to propose with a chicken nugget. She laughed quietly at that one. It felt like a scene from someone else's life. And yet, it was hers. Page by page, Emily's heart tightened. These weren't just photographs. They were moments from before the betrayals, before the late-night lies and cold silences, before the diamond bracelet. They were proof that once something real had existed between them. She wiped at her eyes and closed the album, her breath shaky. That afternoon, she did something she hadn't done since the separation she drove to the pawn shop. The memory of walking through those doors with her grandmother's pearls still haunted her. She had felt stripped bare that day, not just of jewelry, but of pride. Now she was back. The same dusty display cases, the same humming fluorescent lights. And behind the counter, the same man, Thomas Lee. He looked up and immediately recognized her. "Back for the heirlooms?" he asked gently. Emily nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are they still here?" Thomas retrieved a box from the back. "They've been waiting. But it's been a while. There's interest on the amount." He told her the total. Her heart sank. It was more than she had saved. Her hands trembled as she reached into her purse to count what she had. Then a voice behind her said, "I'll cover the difference." She turned. "Richard." He stood in the doorway, breathless, as if he'd rushed to get there. "I had a feeling," he said softly. "You'd want them back." Emily stared at him, unsure what to say. Part of her wanted to refuse, to walk away on principle. But another part remembered what these pieces meant, not just as jewelry, but as pieces of her history, of her identity. "I can't let you keep bailing me out," she said. Richard stepped closer. "Emily, these were never supposed to be here because of me. Let me fix this, just this." After a long pause, she nodded. Later, standing outside the shop with the velvet box clutched to her chest, she whispered, "Thank you." Richard reached out as if to hug her. She stepped back. "I appreciate it," she said. "But it doesn't erase the pain." "I know," he replied. "But it's a start." The days had begun to blur. Diaper changes, feedings, late-night lullabies, whispered in the soft glow of the nursery lamp. For Emily, motherhood was both exhausting and transcendent. In Grace's every breath, every sleepy smile, she found the strength to keep moving forward. Yet despite the calm she had carved out, Richard remained a quiet, persistent presence. His texts were never intrusive. He would ask about Grace's milestones, share a note of encouragement, or drop off groceries with a simple, "thought you might need this," and then he'd disappear again, never pushing. Miranda noticed the shift before Emily did. "He's trying," her sister said one evening as they folded tiny onesies, "but that doesn't mean you owe him anything." I know Emily replied, "But part of me wants to believe people can change." It was that hope, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just hope that led to something unexpected. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, the sky overcast and the streets slick with rain. Richard had dropped by to bring a few baby essentials Emily had run out of. Grace was fussing, tired and hungry, and Emily was juggling a phone call with her freelance client when Richard offered quietly to hold her. "She might remember my voice," he said. And oddly, Grace settled. Her tiny body relaxed in his arms, her cries fading into soft hiccups as he bounced, gently whispering to her. Emily stood frozen in the doorway watching the scene unfold. There was something deeply humbling about it. This man, who had once shattered her, now rocking their child with such quiet tenderness. That night, after Grace had gone down, and the rain tapped gently against the windows, Miranda found Richard sitting in the living room staring at an old photo on the mantel, one of their wedding day back when everything had felt whole. She approached him cautiously. "If you think you can waltz back into her heart with a few grand gestures, think again," she warned. "You broke her. It'll take years to rebuild that trust." Richard didn't argue. He just nodded. "I know. I don't expect a quick fix. But I am committed to Grace and to trying." Miranda studied him carefully. "For Emily's sake and Grace's, I hope you mean that." For once, Richard's eyes held no defensiveness, just quiet, weary resolve. In the days that followed, Emily let her walls drop just slightly. She allowed Richard to join her on walks with Grace. She laughed once, absent-mindedly, when he made a silly face that sent the baby into peals of giggles. She didn't call it healing, not yet. But in that laughter, in the way Grace lit up in her father's arms, there was a flicker, a glimmer of something Emily thought she'd lost. Hope. The chill of spring had given way to a softer warmth, the kind that wrapped around your shoulders like an old friend. Emily stood by the window of her condo, watching sunlight streak across the hardwood floor. It danced over a toy rattle, a folded blanket, and Grace, her daughter, gurgling in a bouncer with sleepy, contented eyes. It had been months since the confrontation, since the storm that had nearly swallowed her whole. And while Emily still carried the scars, there was a calmness settling in her bones now, a quiet resilience she had earned through every sleepless night, every withheld tear. Every moment she stood firm when it would have been easier to collapse. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her messages, pausing at Richard's name. There was a time when just seeing it would have sent a tremor through her, a mix of anger, confusion, and pain. But today her hand was steady. She typed Emily, "Thank you for helping me get my grandmother's pearls back. I know it's just one step, but it means a lot." The message sat there on the screen for a few seconds before she hit send. She didn't expect anything. Not an apology, not closure. It was just acknowledgement, a thread of gratitude offered from a place that was no longer raw, but healing. The reply came quickly. "Richard, I'm just glad you have them again. Let me know if you need anything." Emily stared at the screen. The words were simple, even plain. But something in them, something unspoken, carried weight. Maybe it was the first message in a long time that didn't feel like it came from guilt or obligation. Maybe it was the first time he was listening instead of fixing. She placed the phone back down on the kitchen counter and turned her attention back to Grace. The baby blinked up at her with innocent curiosity, her chubby hands flailing as if to pull her mother closer. Emily scooped her up, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We're okay, little one," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." Later, as Grace napped and Emily sorted through a basket of unfolded laundry, she allowed herself to think about the future. Not just the next doctor appointment or grocery list, but years down the line. What kind of mother did she want to be? What kind of woman? Maybe one day, she and Richard would find a rhythm, a steady, peaceful coexistence as parents, if not as partners. Maybe not. Either way, Emily was no longer defined by his mistakes. She had made it through the worst, and she had done it on her terms. Outside, a bird chirped from a nearby branch. Inside, Emily reached for a fresh set of baby clothes and smiled softly. She had turned the page, and this time she was the one writing the story. In the end, this story of betrayal and heartbreak serves as a powerful reminder. No relationship is immune to temptation, and love can crumble under the weight of secrets. Richard's diamond bracelet for his mistress became the shining symbol of his broken promises, even as his pregnant wife sold her cherished heirlooms just to survive. Yet amid the wreckage, we find small gestures of redemption, a mother's unyielding courage, and the miraculous birth of a baby girl who deserved a better beginning. Sometimes the most devastating choices give us the greatest lessons. If you found this story gripping, emotional, or eye-opening, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with friends who might relate. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic tales that delve into the raw truths of life. Together, let's explore stories that challenge our hearts and hopefully guide us toward healing.